Kia ora, you're listening to Ka Tū Maia, a podcast series for those who want to create a better future, featuring real stories from some of South Auckland's most innovative community changemakers. Listen in as they share the highs and lows, the passion and the persistence, the mighty wins and the epic fails. It's a real and raw kōrero that will leave you inspired and equipped to take the next step in your purpose-driven journey. Ka Tū Maia, be brave. Kia ora everyone, and welcome to our very first episode of this new series that we've been able to pull together. We're talking all about what it's like to be an innovator or a change maker within your community. We've got some amazing people coming up over the next few episodes, and today I have the amazing privilege of having two staunch, strong community innovators here with me today. I feel a little bit intimidated because they're so awesome. We've got Tuputau from Mau Academy, kia ora e hoa.
Kia ora, kia ora.
And we've got Kelly, the one and only Whenua Warrior. Ngā mihi. Welcome. Today in the first episode, we're going to bring it right down to the essence of what it means to be a change maker and what's the most important, and that is he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. It is the people, it is our whānau and our support systems that are the key. Well, the focus for being an innovator and the key to your success as well. So I'm looking forward to this kōrero today. To get us started, though, I'd love to hear a little bit more about who you are and what the mana is of your organisation that you're bringing to the table today. So why don't you introduce yourself? We'll go for you first, Kels.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Kelly Francis tōku ingoa. My name's Kelly. I grew up in South Auckland, Manirewa, 267, and now currently live in Mangere, 274. I built a charitable trust named Whenua Warrior, and Whenua Warrior builds gardens to feed the community, teach the community to feed themselves and empower them to feed each other. But I think the key point that I want to look at now is what we're doing with our food and how it is it that people of other communities can support us to continue doing that. And creating a sustainable relationship is definitely important, and that's actually one of my goals this year.
Awesome.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Kelly.
Kia ora, Kels. Over to you, e hoa.
Well, maro lava soifo ma Rangi mama, o te tautala atu leava ma le whātau tini, a veo leo whai ma whonga tau mori o Mau Studio, o te whaatalo whātu, ma whaawhenua ai o tūra pa ia maro tato mawhutanga. Well, talofa everyone, my name is Tuputau, and I'm a co-founder of a community enterprise called Mau Studio. And I'm looking forward to our kōrero today and talking a little bit more about my experience as a South Auckland entrepreneur and a maker upera and change things upera. But no, excited for our kōrero today.
Yeah. What's the main mahi that Mau Studios does?
Yeah, so I guess this is a evolving description.
As of January 2022.
But yeah, Mau Studio is a regenerative design practice, and we specialize in architectural services or architectural design, but something which has always been somewhat of our point of difference inside the architecture industry is that we also deliver education programs for South Auckland rangatahi, working closely with UNISEC School of Architecture and also providing pastoral care for Māori and Pacific students inside the School of Architecture. But then also, I think this is new for 2022, is, we've also always been looking at what more services can we provide to support Māori and Pacific entrepreneurs. So Mau Studio has been contracted by Pacific Business Trust to support with their program called Hatch, which supports Pacific entrepreneurs in developing their own very unique business model. So so really Mau Studio is working inside architectural design, education and development. That's probably the shortest I've ever put it. So
good work. That's awesome, Tau, and it's awesome to hear the the evolution. Yeah. Good on you, bro. Lucky PBT got you guys with Hatch.
Well, let's see. Give us 2 more weeks.
Yeah, awesome.
Got it.
So we're going to get straight into this topic. I guess my first question to you both would be, why are people so important to what we do?
I think people are most important because we're all here as one. We all have a need to survive within community. We need to survive within our cultures and our spaces. And people are important because we're the ones that fill that. We put the energy back into those spaces, and we're very accepting of each other's needs in certain spaces as well. And I see it a lot with Whenua Warrior and people having a specific need and us collaborating together to make sure that that need is fulfilled and sustained going forward. Tau, it's probably a good question for you, my architectural friend.
Thank you very much for the question. No, I think it's more contextual to the work that we've been doing with Mau Studio and particularly our education programs. But why people are important to our mahi and important to us as as community representatives is, there's growing needs and growing challenges that face humanity every single day. But also at the same time, there's also growing needs and challenges which face our environment, which from an Indigenous perspective and from Māori and Pasifika perspective, humanity or people and environment are very intertwined. So focusing on people and being able to change the mindsets and attitudes of people, I believe is instrumental in creating a better future.
Yeah, for sure.
And really around that, creating that attitudinal change is central to anything that we do at Mau Studio. So and somewhat in the the motto of today's session, I really believe people are change makers naturally. And so how do we bring that out is really how or where we want to position ourselves as entrepreneurs, particularly from South Auckland.
Yeah. Ooh, that's awesome, man. I feel like I already know this is going to be a main kōrero.
I'll send an invoice for that.
Do that. Send it to Eve Jolly.
Oh yeah, I've got her email.
Ka pai. So I guess what we're saying is that people should always be the centre of what you do, right? They should be the core, the focus, the thing that you put all of your energy into. By doing that, what have you noticed, or how does that impact how you do what you do and why you do what you do? Just like in just real practical ways, like how has that impacted your mahi?
I don't think I'd have a mahi if I didn't have people first. It wouldn't exist. There'd be no need being fulfilled. And the reality is our day comprises of us not only having the relationships with people in funding realms, but also community groups that we can collaborate with, small and big businesses to get our materials from, all for the purpose of feeding a home full of people. So it's like, I wouldn't have a reason to get up if it wasn't people, and I actually enjoy it. There was a few years not long ago where I was concentrating a lot on my own self-care and my own building of self. And then once you get through a certain level of that, you then move to your whānau and how it is that you can build the people in your whānau. And in my case, with the support of Foundation North, I've been able to hire 3 of my whānau members. And then you go further out into hapori or community, and how it is that we help people there. If we weren't connected, there'd be no reason for Whenua Warrior. And before we got the support from Foundation North as well, it was all about the people while I had no money. So that was...
So how much is Whenua Warrior's success dependent on relationships?
Quite highly. And everything that we touch, because of the way that our medias and our social medias and things work now, everyone wants to glorify a community story. Which means people want to be involved from the start, and without that relationship or with a reputation that wasn't reportable or proud to be reported on, then there'd be nothing, and when we work on things, it comes to the people first. It's always about my staff making sure they go home happy, because if they're not, then oh no, there'll be no one in tomorrow. So people, yeah.
Awesome. How about you, bro?
So I think for myself and for us at Mau Studio, some of the the really practical benefits for creating somewhat of a model around people is, for one of our programs called Mau Academy was really around identifying what were some of the barriers and challenges facing South Aucklanders, and for us as creatives and designers and having to go through this education system, we found that, and still find today, that arts and creativity is still an undervalued industry from not only society and, you know, governmental and not only systemic, but also from our parents and our families. And so then and there, you know, back in 2017, we saw that was something that we wanted to change, and creating some attitudinal change and systemic change around that. But it didn't mean anything if it wasn't centered around the rangatahi and the youth.
So you might have heard the term systemic change. We often throw these kind of terms and jargon around, but what it means to me is that there's a whole bunch of different systems that sit around an individual. If we look at rangatahi, for example, you know, you've got so many different connections and networks that they are connected to, whether it's church, whether it's school, university, it could be your whānau at home, your workplace, all these different places. You could even consider your local boards, the government, everyone that impacts the life of that rangatahi. So when we want to bring about change in that individual's life, we need to consider the fact that everyone is part of that change. If you aim to help one of these young people change their life, and then they go home to the same environment that is conducive of the old life that they used to live, then it's going to be really difficult to bring about change that is sustainable and change that is not easily undone. Taking that a step further, we then need to think about the indigenous frameworks that are there around that. Another term that gets thrown around a lot. But how do we need to mould how we deliver that change and how we bring about that change by considering Māori, by considering Pasifika, by considering the culture and the ethnicity of the people that we are wanting to bring that change about. We have systems in place at the moment that are largely designed by Western culture, and we know that there are things that are really important from a Māori perspective. For example, whakawhanaungatanga, but getting to know someone as a person, where they're from, connecting with them and drawing a relation to that individual is really important when you're getting into just getting to know someone. But when you want to bring about some change, you need to take that into consideration.
Being a proud De La Salle graduate myself,
James Cook.
there was no better place to start than going back to De La Salle and starting something there. So we started Mau Academy, which is a creative impact academy, and working alongside high schools and tertiary institutions, and creating programs for high school students who wanted to pursue creativity, arts and design. And so since 2018, we've been running the program. And I guess the biggest practical outcomes from that was, you know, little did we understand the real impact of undervaluing creativity within society and within the education system, and what it was doing to youth and people thought processes and our creative processes. And, you know, education these days just seem very streamlined and tick boxing exercise. And so and not just in students who, you know, a lot of students didn't think they were creative, and creativity was pigeonholed and compartmentalized. And so little did we know a lot of these challenges that we're going into. So, you know, we wrapped the whole program around how does one unleash their creative potential. And we've done that through a number of different ways, and, you know, integrating some of our indigenous philosophies and processes, and also a huge part of it was how do the rangatahi then become community leaders themselves, or if they're not already community leaders. But taking them outside of the school and actually doing things inside the community. So practical outcomes was actually youth were able to do real world projects like community gardens and art murals and you know, road art that you can see all across Manukau and Mangere and Papatoetoe now. And so that was an example of practical outcome. And also throughout the program, we're actually inviting families to be part of that process too. So from anywhere from fundraising to actually being part of presentations, and at the end of the program, family actually really understanding the value that creativity has within their child's life, but also from a home perspective.
Perspective. Hey, I just like, honestly, I collaborated with you on part of Mole Studio as well, and like I want to speak to how well Tō collaborated with the entire community. You know, like he obviously had the kids at De La Salle, and by kids we mean Māori, Pacific Island, between these ages, you know, and kids who were already interested in this style of work. I'd never seen it before, because I work with, you know, plants and dirt. But then he also collaborated with the Kaitiaki ki Humatau, and then went down to the marae and asked about what the whānau wanted. Not only that, but you held some overnight stays in the marae and fed the funds back into local spaces, and then heard the real-time story of that space, so that when the kids got to design and paint a thing, it was fueled with the story that was just told to them. So it's not a it was a conscious effort to not recolonize the space, because the goal was to capture that story and then bring it back to life in nowadays terms, reflecting on the solutions that used to be had and bringing them forward to today. And when that collaboration was happening, I was like, we need to do this again. Yeah. So we're going to make seedling houses as of next Monday, eh?
Yeah, you guys are collaborating all the time, eh?
Yeah.
Well, it's, well, thanks for that, Kelly. Invoice me.
Oh, he's got 2 invoices
actually,
so far.
I believe you owe me hours, actually.
And I think just based on, you know, that kōrero from Kelly was, I think the main outcome, and I tell this to everyone, like the biggest outcome from our programs and from any of our work is that the youth and rangatahi leave having a greater sense of self. And I think that self-sovereignty and mana motuhake, or what we call as your actual mau, that's what's being lost, or what has been lost over at least the last century and a half. And so it's how do we regenerate some of this thinking into and develop programs and businesses around that, so we allow not only our youth and not only our elders, but everyone who is engaged through our business to really understand themselves a lot more and mutually their communities. So those are some practical outcomes, and happy to go into depth in some of them. But
yeah, I think like one of the like a couple of points that we brought up in our earlier kōrero, one was around like knowing that there's a wider living system at play within a community, and then also that you're part of an intergenerational story. It'd be cool to unpack that a little bit more and what that means in the form of relationships and understanding what's going on, so that you can play your part in connection with everything else. Yeah, who wants to start on that one?
Charlie.
Lucky you're a fast thinker, girl.
Yeah. Well, actually, intergenerational, anything comes quite naturally anyway, because when I look at my age group or my generation, we should be looking up to receive the knowledge and be looking down to teach the knowledge. And there's this tuakana Taina style, business model that flows within Whenua Warrior as well, where we reflect on our ancestors, we reflect on our aunties, uncles, kōros, and then we take that information, we shape it into something that can be shared with our babies that they actually care about in 2022, and then we give it to them, you know. I feel like there was a lady that said, oh, yeah, this is Kelly Francis, and she's a gardener. And I kind of laughed at her because I was like, oh, no, gardeners just garden, you know. And then when you think about what an actual Whenua Warrior is and what we do, we actually create a space for that all to happen. So that nanny and that stranger's mokopuna are in the same space at the same time, and that mokopuna can take on the knowledge from that nanny. And it's pretty much my role just to make sure that space can keep flowing through, and we have the intergenerational flow effect, so that because the kids don't only need to learn, the elders also need to be listened to. If we don't have that space, it doesn't happen. And in the middle here, we are just responsible to make sure that, hey, those kids turn up, that nanny's there, everyone's safe, warm and happy, everyone's got a kai. Okay, now we can do that garden thing that we've been paid to do. You know, it's kind of second to how important our people are, and when I say our people, I mean all of the people of all cultures across South Auckland as well. We're all responsible to be a vessel of knowledge and share it within our different age groups, our different generations, cultures, races, and just allow it to happen so freely in a community space that we can contain.
Yeah, I love that.
Your turn, G.
Oh gosh,
That was cool, Kels. Yeah. There's so much info. It's almost like
I know.
overload.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, but it's beautiful.
But I think it's important to unpack, and I think definitely an important part of our work really is, well, if I'm kind of positioning it inside a kind of my entrepreneurial journey was, starting from a very linear way of thinking, like us having to start something and then finish it, and there's only one way of doing it, and if I'm going to finish it by myself, and we'll get this thing up, and then all of a sudden everything just starts piling on and becomes very complex and difficult, and but also in reflection, and if we're putting it within a timeline, really that's how we're trained to think in this day and age, and we can get into conversations around industrial revolution and the way that it's influenced every kind of system that we're thinking about, and that's a decade or even a century worth of thought processes which we're still somewhat kind of transitioning out of, but just this whole kind of Western versus Indigenous way of thinking, and really how does our business and how do our services, but also kind of intentional community building look like, and I guess a big part of this conversation is around what does the decolonization of these spaces look like, and some of the practical ways that people are putting out there is moving from generational thinking or period thinking into more intergenerational thinking, and something that one of my mentors, Peter Sykes, always told me was, if you're not thinking intergenerationally, then you should probably stop Mouse Studio right now. And
how did you take that when he first said that?
I walked out and probably
he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Doesn't know nothing. I take everything as a healthy challenge, and at that point in my entrepreneurial journey, I didn't know what he was talking about, but I realized that there was a lot of kind of self-development that I was going through, which was craving something like that, and so I took education programs that we were developing and starting to look at, now what does that look like over the next 50 years? Or if I'm just working with high schools, then how do I bring different generational ways of thinking into that space? And so, through Peter Sykes and Me Family Services based in Māngere East was our first contract that paid for the first Mau Academy. And the whole challenge that whole year was, what does the 7th generation mode of thinking look like, and how does Mau Academy represent that? So based on some of the kōrero Kelly brought up earlier was, that's where I started saying, if we're working with high school students, what are all the support networks that they need in order to understand their potential?
Cool.
And so that looked like bringing in a tertiary partner, that looked like bringing in industry partners, that looked like bringing in creative mentors. So a big ups to Amelia Puya Taylor and Daniel Goddard and a few of the others who put their hands up to say yes, and they're still part of the program now. And Waikare Komene, gosh, a lot of those people were coming in.
You're such a name dropper.
And those are all cool people. Just saying.
But it's around, I think our role as South Auckland entrepreneurs, particularly understanding the impacts or systems that are working against us, is if we're not thinking intergenerationally, if we're not thinking systemically, then a lot of the work that we're doing is going to be in vain.
That's right, yeah.
So I saw that Mau Academy, or at least our education programs, was a way of bringing together different ways of thinking, different generations, different expertise, and to wrap around the rangatahi through their creative journey. So it's been 4 years in the making, or 5 years in the making, and I think last year, which was the 4th year running the program, was the first time which I actually sat back and said, fuck, I think we cracked it. And it's taken a lot of risk and a lot of failures to get there, and
Yeah.
It hasn't been perfect. It's still not perfect, but I think, when you start off creating an enterprise, you do this sketch. I think for us, it was a sketch in the Philippines on a cardboard on a dodgy ass motel,
Yeah.
I think last year I actually sat back and then reflected on that sketch that we made, and I was like, wow, we actually implemented that.
That's
4
so
years
cool,
later.
eh?
So,
That's so cool when you have those moments. Oh, there's so many things off that I wanted to pick, but that was a beautiful story. I think while we're at it, like, what role do like mentors and experts that are around you play in your ability to do what you do?
When you like speaking in Whenua Warrior's history, oh my goodness, there's been so much stuff I don't know.
So many whacks,
So
so
many
many
things,
whacks
like
to
so
make you
many
listen.
Yeah, so many tears, my goodness. And like with entrepreneurial stance and community in general, I like to call it hautotutanga. So just doing something over and over and over and over until you're good at it. And then when you're good at it, you find a way to make money from it, or you find a way to make relationships from it, or find more people to do it for, depending on what your goal is. And oh man, there's so much to learn outside of that.
Was there a point where you thought you didn't need mentors, that you knew everything?
No. Well, yeah, maybe. Maybe when I first got my fund from Foundation North. But, even then, once we had our first chunk of money that was able to pay for stuff over an entire year or over 2 or 3 projects, even that's not easy, just because you have money now doesn't mean I magically know how to spend it.
Oh, totally. It's a whole different type of anxiety, eh?
Exactly.
The anxiety of getting the funding and then the anxiety of delivering on the funding.
Yeah.
It's different.
And then
Are we talking about anxiety?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the disease of this generation, right?
Nosebleeds. Mentors have been with me from the very beginning, and I think that speaks as well to their faith in the idea of Whenua Warrior, and how we purely for the first 3 years built gardens for free with nothing. Aroha Harris was a tauira with me. She was a student in Kaioranga, which is where I kind of touched on the first chunk of gardening as an adult, and how I can use my mauri to be able to better the life of the plant that I'm going to be eating from, which will better my life. And you go through all this all these pulls and pushes and stuff, and then Aroha has become a po in the Foundation North Māori advisor area. Sorry Aroha, I don't know your actual role, but I still love you. I'm going to drop off some seedlings too soon. But it goes from there, and when you work in Te Ao Māori, and I'm sure this is the same with Mau as well, you end up just meeting people who are good at different parts of what you need to learn. When you're halfway through that, you then understand that, okay, well, there needs to be some kind of a way to pull that person into the kaupapa. You can't just keep taking the advice, because there's the advice, and then there's the doing, and then there's the following up of the doing, and being accountable for things that you didn't end up doing.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, absolutely.
You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but you were talking just before about how you were doing the mahi with no putia, no money, and then you went through this transition, which I saw you go through this transition to then becoming someone who got money to do what you did, and I know that wasn't easy for you. Like, what do you mind talking a little bit about that, and then also the role that mentors played within that as well?
Mentally, you need to swap over from being the person that gives it for free out of your heart and is happy and okay with receiving reward from the heart, to then creating a space where money is being exchanged. And for me, there wasn't a lot of confidence in that, because
money was the root of what's wrong with the system, right?
Of all systems,
especially the food system.
Especially the food system. $6.50 for a lettuce at Pack and Save.
So then you had to sell out and start making money off it.
Yeah, I had to. And the reality is, like, sitting here 5 years later and having 2 big sponsorships from Foundation North, I now pay 9 staff. So there's the push and pull, and you've really got to mentally get over that idea that money's just going to solve all of your issues, because it doesn't. Because I still had the same issues, just with zeros in my account. A couple of numbers in front of those zeros. So
and a few more issues with it.
and a few more issues, because now I have to spend it. And it's like, oh my God, how do you do that? How do you spend that amount of money on anything when you've gone from absolutely nothing to this many zeros? And it's not necessarily a solution for all people, There wasn't an operational process at that point. We had no steady way of performing what we needed to do. There was no way of continuously accessing materials, resources, people, time, aroha, because you still need all of that. And then the difficult part came as well when we transitioned from being funded by funders, philanthropy or government funded or local funded, however it comes, to also going into business, because now you're selling, which is a third completely awkward feeling, and to be able to transition between the three with the focus on the fact that I now have 9 staff to pay. It's
a different type of thing.
Oh, man.
Different type of pressure too.
I've chewed through a few mentors.
Yeah.
Just a few, not naming
Spat
too many.
them out and
Kia ora moana. Kia ora Shay, my bad. But, it's because when I first started, I knew I could do this for free. I knew exactly what it took to do this for free by myself, out of my crappy van with my crappy spade that always broke and I had to fix and then to get money and have 6 spades and 6 people and
a mean ass truck.
And a mean ass truck, G. Thank you for the Ford Ranger. It's got a sticker on it now. It's looking good. But transitioning out of those 3 phases wasn't easy alone. Even making a decision to get an accountant wasn't easy to make, because then there's the whole, what do we start with? Business plans, what do we start with? Strategy plans and forecasted budgets, what do we start with? How do we even go from not having those things to having those things? And the way that I had to do it was figuring out the operational side first, and working out exactly how much money we needed to run these projects. And then I could fill in the forecasted budget, which obviously took a lot of trust from my board. Thank you, Pans. Thank you, Tomo, and partners. Because without that patience, I would have been tied into a very hard, contracted, obliged set of rules, which I wasn't ready for. But Foundation Health helped us to, bring on the right people and have that process be written up and improved. And now we're building 4 gardens a day instead of 1 a week.
Yeah, so amazing. You're a machine, sis, honestly.
Machine, right.
How about you, Tau? Mentors?
Yeah.
Mentors and experts.
It's very, very similar, learnings or experiences as Kali. If it wasn't for some of the mentors that we've had over the last, 5 years or even longer than that. If I'm looking at my family, for instance, and the support that they've provided in this journey of mine, it definitely wouldn't have been achievable, and at least I wouldn't, be in a position that I'm in now. But from a business perspective, as I had alluded to, some of my coaches or my mentors, Peter Sykes and Waikare Komeni, have been very fortunate to, be in a space with them that they're actually willing to share their learnings over the last few years, and who are genuinely looking at actually Mile Studio as also an evolution of some of the work that they've done over a very long time. And but getting to the comfortability of even approaching someone to be your mentor, I think that's a different kind of conversation. And for a while there, I think everyone, being somewhat of an entrepreneur or just starting your own business can be very, very overwhelming. And as Kelly had mentioned, there's so many different things that you have to think about.
But no one tells you to think about them. That's the whole thing, eh?
Yeah, or at very least you're not listening.
I don't even think you want to listen. I think there's a stubbornness to
everything.
Yeah.
Oh, and I definitely wasn't listening. And then someone
entrepreneurs are stubborn.
Oh yes, we are.
Yeah.
And then I had a conversation with someone around the significance of having a mentor, and you know, in one way how they framed it really was around, and which really humbled me was that, you know, having a mentor actually acknowledges all the hard work and a lot of the challenges and the failures and the successes of people who have come before you. They've allowed you to think in this way and has opened the space for you to be the way that you are. So I think that was a really important part of my journey, was getting to that kind of position of humility and understanding, actually, I need to humble myself and actually realize that I do not know shit about anything. And that was only yesterday.
I reckon it's true, the more you get into it, the more you realize you just don't know.
And then it becomes overwhelming, but the role that a mentor can play is that it makes it less overwhelming and can really straighten up your line of progress. And but I think a really important learning that I have taken from, you know, this kind of mentorship was that I think mentorship can come in a number of different ways. So, you know, for example, you can have a buddy who is just going to sit there and listen to everything that you talk about and just allows you to vent and, you know, talk through that stuff. And then you can start moving into an actual mentor who is there to help you through things and get you to look at things with a different perspective and allow you to work things out for yourself. And then you can start getting into coaching. And I think this would have been, you know, highly valuable, and I highly recommend looking for an executive coach or a leadership coach or a business coach.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I find the difference between a coach and a mentor is that a coach really helps you build your capability around, you know, in one way it's kind of looking at what don't you have right now, which will allow you to be a lot more efficient. And then how do you work at the best, or how does the business best reflect your values and the value system that you're putting in place? They're just a lot more constructive. And I think from an entrepreneur, that was, you know, hugely valuable from my end. And then you can start looking at coaching and mentoring as your mentor really building up your emotional capacity to think about things and to change your perspective on things. And then once you get your perspective or direction, then you can get into a coach to really take you through constructively, how do you get from A to B, and to, you know, really learn from your failures and take some learnings along that way. So, you know, on the conversation around mentors, it's really understanding that there could be, you know, there's different spheres. You can have a buddy, you can have a mentor, you can have a coach, but even with inside that, you know, you can really break that up. So, you know, one learning that I took away was actually start breaking up everything that you need. Like, where's creating the most anxiety? Or, you know, what is overwhelming right now?
We're not talking about anxiety today, are we?
Ko oe hadra. And, you know, just really start figuring out what don't you have right now? Where can you grow? And I think that's the biggest thing that you can do as, you know, as a business owner or an entrepreneur starting out, or just in everyday life, no matter what kind of position that you're in, is, you know, ask yourselves, you know, where can I grow? And then that's where the mentor and the coach slots into. They can start talking about and taking you through the how. So this is how we're going to get from A to B, and this is how we're going to mitigate your anxiety and, you know, these kind of different emotions that are going on as you're developing your business. So there's that part. And then I also feel like, as a business owner, is really developing the right team around you. Because your team is freaking equally as important as a mentor, you know. And if you build the right team around you, then everyone is going to be your mentor, and you're kind of building an environment for yourself to really challenge yourself and grow and not stay comfortable and stay content with and complacent, I should say. So I think those kind of 4 different areas, and the buddy and the mentor and a coach and the right team is critical. And I've gone through my, you know, fair share of mentors and coaches and ever evolving team, and I can see the value of all of them in my journey.
And that's it, like I feel the same. Like, mentors come and go. Whether you chew them up and spit them out, or you just you grow through seasons, and you go through seasons, and you come across different people, and some people are there for a short time, some a long time.
Both have reasons.
Yeah, I just brought on a couple of new mentors last year because I was in a phase that I'd never been in before. I was out of my depth. It was overwhelming me, and I needed someone that could help me navigate that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't anyone that I had before.
Yeah.
So I had to seek out different people. I had to start paying for it as well.
Yeah.
But it's worth the investment.
That's a really healthy conversation to have around who is your mentor, who is your coach. And it can't be your bloody next door neighbor. It can't be your cousin. You know, and well, I shouldn't say it can't, but you know, someone that told me that like a mentor or a coach should be, you know, if you're thinking about your cousin and being your mentor, actually get your cousin to refer someone. And then speak to that person and get that person to refer someone. So you don't know this person indirectly. You know them indirectly. And they don't have any kind of emotional connection to your situation. Because
whānau and friends play a role, right? Whānau and friends are there to support you through the ups and downs of life. And to maybe listen to your entrepreneurial stories, maybe not.
They don't really care.
But then you bring the experts in. And then I guess the only other thing I was thinking of as you guys were chatting was that I always try and make sure that I'm mentoring others as well.
Absolutely.
And get that real balance, that it's not just I guess that there's satisfaction, number one, in investing in other people. I find it, especially in younger people. But it's also good for you, I think, that you get to glean off the people that have gone before you, and you also get to pass that down. And it should be a part of your practice.
Absolutely.
It keeps you nice and balanced, but it also helps continue that, I don't know, the intergenerational stuff. Keep the good energy flowing as well.
That Tū model is kind of the same,
Totally, and keep it going both ways.
Old, young, but also like that person knows a thing, that person needs to know a thing. So if I can be the vessel between the two, you know, it all just flows better, and it could be to do with anything. And mentors really, to take the label away, it's someone who knows something you need to know to be able to continue successfully, you know. So
and surprisingly, those younger ones will teach you a lot too, They really will. Like how to do TikTok, stuff like that.
And I think that's totally true, and we get it every year we run another education program. We're learning equally as much as the students are, and I think some students find it challenging when they ask us, what are we going to do? And you say, well, what do you want to do?
You
know,
decide.
We're not going to come with a prescribed program. Let's develop this program together, and it comes with its trials, and you know we've been testing it a lot. But the kind of authority and the sovereignty that they get from actually developing their own program, you know, you learn a lot from that, and then also you put yourself also in the seat of a learner. No longer is there a hierarchy between teacher and student. You know, that traditional hierarchy, but it's more in that kind of tuakana teina, or that everyone is just learners and students in that space.
And I feel like that's awesome. Thank you, Tau. Segue into the next point that I wanted to bring up, which was around allowing the community or allowing those people that you serve to take the lead. And I guess what I thought would be good for us to discuss is the pros and the cons in that.
Nice.
And that concept and that idea. Why is it good to do that? But then also what can be some of the fallouts? I know, I'll start, I know for in some of my earlier years in youth development, we went really hard on allowing young people to dictate, or not even dictate, but to voice and share what it is that they wanted to do. And it didn't take long to realise that within this community that we were working in, that there was actually quite a limited view that these young people held of what was possible and what was, you know, what their potential was. And so when we let them dictate or communicate what they wanted, it was really actually small, the things that they thought about and the things that they wanted. After a couple of months, honestly, we were like, is that all? Is there nothing else that you want? And so that led us to, I guess, respond in a way that meant that we just did things that created more opportunities for them. Whether they engaged in it or not wasn't the problem. It was about showing them new things and showing them new ways and new dreams or new ideas or new activities that if they haven't had access to before, how can they even know to ask for it? So that was, I guess that's my start. Who wants to keep kōreroing? Kōreroing.
Kōreroing.
Oh, my nephew's going to have me for that one.
I think actually it touches on when it's a community-led kaupapa and we need to receive all of that feedback from all the different communities in the community. It speaks to how difficult funding applications can actually be as well. So I feel like I'm speaking more to a con of community leading, mainly because we as community leaders or entrepreneurs or innovators, we know what we're trying to accomplish, and then you have the funding application in front of you and the box says, but what are you going to do? And it's like, oh, I don't know, because your funding grant actually closes tomorrow/tonight at midnight, and I've still got to talk to all of the community to understand clearly what it is that I want to do.
So write that in the what are you going to do? Talk to the community.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, are they going to like that? Because I should have done this by now. So, you know, and the other thing as well, not to make it too political, because we all know how I get politically, but it's quite hard to please all people.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at the people that are in our community that we're feeding as Whenua Warriors, we're going out, we're building gardens and things. One way to solve that is to allow them a space to come to us. Rather than me going out and pushing a garden on a new business or on a solo mum of 10 or, you know, a nanny that's done her back in, we've opened up a space so that it is community fed and it is community led, and we wanted to build 300 gardens this year. We wanted to do that with the support of Foundation North. We've been able to not only do that, but we've secured other partnerships, which now means we can do possibly up to 600 gardens. So, you know, we're using this model to try and show, hey, look, we can do this cool stuff. And realistically, the more money that you give, the more I can keep doing this. And we'll just turn it from 300 to 600 to 600 plus and just keep going across all regions of Aotearoa. And the community the community make it easier because they come to me asking for what it is that they want. But I can see where other models would be very difficult if you're waiting on feedback from marae's, churches, schools, primaries, you know, different ethnicity backgrounds, and trying to get everybody's input on something and then make the application date. It can be difficult to have a community-led structure. And I think I'm speaking to the con of that. Yeah.
If we're trying to serve our community, we need to understand in depth what the need and aspirations are. Kia ora, my name is Te Rangi Pārima. I am 24 years old and I am one of the 2 co-directors of the Community Builders NZ Trust. The Community Builders NZ Trust is a trust run by myself and Lina Niseni. We pretty much umbrella a lot of projects run in Otara. Some of those projects including the Otara Kai Village, the Otara Marakai, the Otara Youth Hub, the Otara Bike Burb, to name a few. We also branch over to the Clover Park Community House, of which we umbrella as well. As a trust, our collective goal is to see and inspire local procurement. So we want to see our community grow with our community. And we know as a trust and within each of our projects and the different areas that they cover, that it's really important to make sure that our community is involved with the changes that happen within our community. Us as a trust, we know we've had multiple conversations of how can we do this for our community, I guess needs change. I think as a trust we believe that listening to our community is the first step to actually understanding in depth what our community needs are. An example of listening to our community in regards to when needs change would be back in August when we went into our last lockdown. So from previous lockdowns, we know that, you know, COVID had a huge impact on our communities. And each lockdown, we actually noticed that the needs change. And I think it's just really important for us to, if we're going to serve our community, to actually know what the needs are. And that's why it was important for us to ask the question. So if you want to reach out to your community, the best place to start is with your neighbours. And that's exactly where the Community Builders NZ Trust started. Building relationships with your neighbours through Pātaka Kai is one of another projects that we run. But our whole trust was actually built on just knowing who your neighbours are. And I think that's beautiful, because if you look at our timeline of where we've come from, to just knowing your neighbours, and then therefore knowing your neighbours across from your neighbours and coming together as neighbours, it really just builds community in itself, and then you expand from there. Everyone has ideas, and I think it's super special when you bring everyone together, because you get to understand what their perspective of certain things are, and what ideas they might have, and and how they want to get involved. And I think our community is not, as a whole, our community doesn't necessarily need to mean every single person with an otara, but if we start small, you can grow from there.
No, it's community building or community networking or bringing together community relationships which are already existing is a mammoth of a task. It's big, and I guess some of the challenges that we face in doing that is that, well, within that process of bringing the community together is, I think over the last 5 decades, community building and community seems to be somewhat of a umbrella term for people doing meaningful things.
Yeah.
And
nicely spotted.
It seems like it's a cliche thing for funders or organizations to show that they're actually doing something meaningful within the community, but they just go about it doing the things that they're going to do anyway. So something that we've defined going through our community design workshops or co-design with a KAU design. Is, short for kaupapa, and understanding, what is the essence of what we're trying to do within
What
that
you're talking
neighborhood.
about, cows.
No, that's the next podcast. Is really defining who that community is. And that's a process in doing that. And it's going to take a lot of conversations, and it's not a 2-day process. It's a very lengthy process, and something that's been lost over the last, however long it's been, is trust between people and the systems that are wanting to do community engagement.
Absolutely.
So we find that our work really is around building that trust again between people, and what does that look like? And so really what we're trying to do within Maostudio and our projects is understanding who are the communities that are marginalized and displaced in this conversation, and why are we here, and what are the conversations that need to take place, and between who. And then the further and the deeper and deeper that you get into defining who the actual community is that needs to benefit from this, that's when you get into the crux of what your business should be doing, what your services should be. And it's a lengthy and a quite a hard process. Some people have been doing it for 30 years and they still haven't cracked it, and that's a compliment.
Yeah.
And they're still nested
doing
inside
it,
the community and doing it. So, and another important part of the conversation. So that first part was really around defining your community and then wrapping your support systems around that once you've defined it. So for us was, for example, for the education programs, our community was, youth from Mangere who want to pursue creative pathways, for example. Or we have a community based in Ihumātao, or is it Makota Marae, is it, the local iwi, or, is it the Manarewa High School? We're starting to get closer and closer, as opposed to South Auckland in general. We're starting to get really defined in who that community is.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that, therefore, once you define that, then your services are naturally place-based. So community initiatives need to be place-based, and that comes from defining who that community is.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then it comes down to who wants to define who the community is, and who wants to go through the community engagement process,
and who do you exclude?
Yeah,
it's like, oh no, yucky questions.
I think that it's just then you start bumping into timeframes and budgets, and people starting to define or dictate how much community engagement time you actually have in order to get the result that they need in order to go forward with the project anyway. So a huge part of our role within side projects is surfacing the value of community engagement and why that is important. and why is community important. And so, and if we're going back to some of the conversations that we had earlier around why is this conversation important, and we realized that, you know, if we're looking at Auckland particularly, or Aotearoa, is we have Māori and Pasifika communities who have been displaced for many, many generations now, and some people can't empathize with what generations of displacement looks like.
Yeah.
And what the systemic trauma that creates. And if we're looking at the rangatahi who only had, you know, one kind of way of thinking, that's from generations of systemic trauma. That's just a kind of generalization from my end, and I don't mean to offend anyone by saying that, but, you know, there's a reason why those rangatahi could only think beyond a certain demographic there within their community, and that's oppression and systemic trauma at its kind of greatest, and from my perspective anyway. And so that's why it's important, is because we need to, or there's displaced communities who don't understand their own potential and can't dream, or they can't aspire to be anything more than what they know, and they aren't exposed to the pathways and opportunities that many other people have. So understanding the kind of benefits of that and the value of that will really start unlocking some of the initiatives that people can create and the real meaning behind it all, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So for me, the biggest thing out of it all is why is community engagement is important, is because we can create stronger self-awareness and a stronger sense of self for people and their community. So
yeah. That's deep, bro. Honestly, I'm just sitting here like, shit. That question was so shallow.
But it's, you know.
It's beautiful though, because it is like at a heart, I think, for anyone that finds himself in this type of mahi, really what we're trying to do is allow people to see their potential, right?
Absolutely.
And then afford them the opportunity to fulfill that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, there's so many different things, so many different barriers, and one of them is like one of the, I guess, steps in that is getting them to the point where they can self-determine,
Exactly.
which means choosing what they want to do or what they would want to have out of it. And I suppose for those of us that are starting out, that is a nice way to start, to be able to say, we've got $1,000, what do you reckon we should do with it? Instead of saying in this really benevolent white saviour way, I've got $1,000 and I will do this for you. And you will take it and you will love it.
And say thank you.
And say thank you very much. Yeah. So it's changing that up, which I think. And I do think, for those that are especially starting out in the game, just start like that, like ask and listen and see what people come up with. And as you grow in your, I guess, place within that network and within that community and your knowledge and your mana and your reputation, then you can start to open up different pathways and facilitate new ways for people to self-determine and come where they want to, But it does have to start somewhere.
Yep.
It does have to start somewhere. I've got kind of one more thing I reckon we should chat on before we wrap up, and that is, I guess my question to you is, you have a burning passion to make a difference in our communities. Have you ever thought that you would be able to achieve that on your own?
Honestly?
Yeah. Honestly. And then what do you think now?
In the first year?
Yeah.
In the first year, bro, I had a cape, I had an S, I had everything. I knew it all.
Why did you have to ask this question?
Because it's the truth. We all think we're the bomb.
Yeah, and I'm sure we all started saying,
complex.
I want to change the world. Like, I'm sure, we've all said that 50, 60
You get
times.
you get fed up with the crap, right? And you want to do something about it.
Oh, yeah.
And you think you're the only one in the world that
that
does
knows
and
what the
that
hell's
can.
going on. Yeah. But once you get over that hump though, once you like really, really, really burn yourself to the ground and go, oh my God, I can't do it by myself. There's this massive change, and just everything goes, right, we got to delegate this, we got to get this, we need more money for that, we need more resources, we need more time, we need more aroha, okay, go. And then you see the next set of problems, and you go, okay, right, now this set of problems we're going to do this for, and then we're going to make these, and we need more rich friends. We actually need a couple more trucks, we need a couple more trailers, we need a couple more, and then it's just the wave of fear. You are not the only one. You will not be able to do this by yourself. It is literally impossible, because when you even look at yourself doing it, even whoever you think you are, when you look at yourself doing it, there is still limitations on that. Because when it's one person, you're still only talking about one person's set of 24 hours, one person's set of energy, one person's set of ideas, one person's reflection on the experiences that one person has had. So it'll never be enough, you know. And my advice to that person out there in the community going, yeah, gee, I got this, I know all the answers. You don't. No one person knows the answers to anything in our community, because you just meet another person and that person has a whole other problem. And another thing I want to say as well, with the community leading things, there's a lot we can't report on. You know, there's a lot that as community leaders and as people of the community, we see everything. So, you know, there's just going to be a whole chunk of that story that will never, ever be told anyway. Yeah. So bring people in so that their eyes can see it, and then empower them to teach the next person, and then that person will have a chance to see it. And then everything just goes way smoother when it's not just you. Yes. It really, really does. It took me 5 years.
Your turn. These are your confessions.
I think this. So to answer your question, yes, I think there was a point there where I genuinely thought, gosh, what we've come up with is amazing. You know, you get that thought. I think this was in 2017. We started Mau. You know, I came back from overseas, and then on my trip back, I stopped by Samoa, and what a great way to bring you back down to earth.
Humble yourself, G. Where's
So-
that channel?
That's so true, man. That
You
is
know,
so true.
Me and my cousin, you know, and who was, you know, now just recently joined Mal Studio this year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, back then, you know, we were kind of conceptualizing what Mal Studio is going to look like and what are some of the things that we can do, and having this kind of Pan-Pacific model, and it was like, you know, and no one's done this, and so we came up with another great sketch of ours. Came another great sketch, and then you know, one of our other mentors was you know, a relative of mine is Tuatanga Loa Joanne Dale, who has, you know, just over the last 13 years post the tsunami back in Samoa, developed a development trust called Boltasi Development Trust. But I didn't know this back then. So anyway, we said, okay, we need to go sit down with Joe and pitch him this idea and see if we can do it here in Samoa. And so we're talking about this holistic model and, you know, architecture projects or community projects, and you have all these different things which are positioned around it, like development and, you know, women equality and, you know, all these different things, agriculture. So go sit down with him, and then, you know, we're taking him through the sketch, you know, one by one, different things that we can do, and then I could just see him looking at me. He'd never looked once at his sketch pad and just look at me. And I stopped, and both of us looked at him and he said, oh, we're already doing that. You know? It's like, we've been doing that for the last 10 years. How is this new? And I went, oh my gosh, I've been so, pop, that light bulb, that balloon just went right out there. I, you know, jumped on that plane with my head down, but you know, interestingly enough, we've been working with Boltasi Development Trust ever since then, and really has helped shape our way of thinking. And anyway, I think that the learning that came from that was around, you know, before you start thinking you have the best idea in the world, there's actually centuries or, you know, thousands of years of models of what you think you're doing that has already been tested, evolved, and you just play one part in that evolution.
That's right.
And maybe you're doing something unique. Of course, everyone has their own unique value proposition, but what it really forced us to do was, you know, he was talking about place-based back then, or what is systems approach, and what does that look like in South Auckland, or what does that look like anywhere that you go in. So what I do now, and some of the methodologies or methods that we put in place, is one of the first things is mapping out who already exists inside that community and what are the work that they're already doing there. And then basically our role is that one is to facilitate them coming together, based on the kōrero of defining the community. Once we define the community and bringing the right people in. And then really our services around how do we fill the gaps?
Yeah.
So it's a total attitudinal shift from we gonna do it all, I know everything, to humbling ourselves to actually saying, there's already a living system wherever we go. And when I say living system, I mean there's the maunga, there's the awa, there's people, but also there are different organizations and there are different institutions who are doing incredible things.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we just need to do is either catalyze them coming together or just complementing what they're doing, not doing anything new, because that's not going to do any justice to anyone, particularly the people that we're wanting to do this work for. So it's really changed our shift in Mal Studio and a lot of the different programs and initiatives that we're running now. And it's become a fundamental of ours is seeing the community with new eyes, and that's from our perspective, not anyone else's perspective. So, there was one point where I thought I knew it all, but it takes mentors, it takes coaches, it takes buddies, it takes whānau,
heaps of mistakes. Heaps of mistakes.
That's it,
because once you make the mistake, you realise you don't know the answer to that question, and then you go, bloop, 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 by the end of the day, and
back down to reality.
And you can live up in the clouds for a few days here and there, but we're helping at community level. We can't afford to be in the clouds. That's time wasted, that's energy wasted, that's building up this whole dream and stuff that was never achievable in the first place. Don't get me wrong, building dreams is great, but build them relative to what you actually can do. I want to change the world. Yeah, cool. But Kelly, how about you change your whānau first? Start with this one house first. Then move to 127 houses in a weekend with no money. Then, with the support of Foundation North, move to 300 houses over a year. Then, with the sponsorships and friendships that you're creating, move to 600. Move to 1,000.
Awesome.
You can't just, if I was face to face with that Kelly, I'd be like, bro, you got to start from the beginning. Don't try and skip steps, Don't try and just jump to the millions because you don't know how to spend the thousands yet. Don't try and jump to the 500 volunteers because you can't run 5 yet. And take things a little bite at a time, but never stop taking those bites, because every bite, whether you succeed with it or whether you fail forward with it, either way, you've got to understand what it is that your skill set can allow you to do and bring on the other person that can do the other thing.
That's it. That was the only thing I was going to say is if you think that you're going to be the expert at everything, then you're already stupid. You're just not. You're just not. You're not going to be the be all and end all. You're going to need other people, other perspectives, other levels of experience and expertise. For me, early on, my biggest intimidation was finances and spreadsheets and legal stuff and tax and all of that. And so then obviously the first person that I was keen to get into our business partnership was someone that was super confident in that space and as well had similar value alignment and could see the value in what we were doing. And that person still today is a really important part of what we do and a really good... Have you met our business partner, Barry?
Barry.
Yeah, from Pledge Me.
Yeah, from Pledge Me. Yeah. I know Barry.
Barry, so he sits on as a director of Ngāhere Communities and is still really cool. As we're looking through now, we're at the point of looking at actually taking on a pretty cool investor. Who you guys might know, so I won't say anything yet.
Ooh.
And
good luck.
And also just the different stuff in the back end of the business. Like when we started this, you'll remember us in the early days, and we were coming into this agreement of property management that we hadn't done before, not at this degree. And there was all these bloody spreadsheets and stuff that big property management companies had come up with. And I just looked at them and it was just made me cross-eyed. And then to
7 pages.
enter into these conversations with these high-level property managers to convince them that we could handle it. I could not have those conversations. I didn't have the vocabulary even to enter. And so having them Bardi walk into the room with me and convince these people that we were sweet was one of the reasons that we got the contract that got us to the next stage and what we were trying to build. So.
And I just want to say as well, I was so
time.
proud of you when I found out you had a building, not only a building, but 2 stories and staff in it and in the middle of Manukau, like, because we met at Tākoha where you were thinking, oh, I might do a crowdfunding thing, I might try and do this thing. And I was like, nah, Bolt, can't do it. Like,
and then by then, the contract was signed. I didn't have a choice. It had to come through somehow to put my money where my mouth was. But yes, it's hindsight's beautiful. You can look back at all those painful things and just remember the good parts. Anyway, thank you both so much. That was a beautiful kōrero, an awesome way to kick off the series. You can check out what both Tau and Cal's do online, social media, wherever you are, you'll be able to find them. So thank you both so much, and big shout out to Foundation North for making this happen and for investing in our communities. All right, much love. We'll see you on episode 2. Ka kite.
Ka kite.
Ngā mihi nui, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed that episode. Ka Tū Maia was proudly brought to you by Foundation North. To enhance lives, Foundation North provides funding and support to initiatives large and small to respond to their communities now and for generations to come. Check them out on Facebook, Instagram, or www.foundationnorth.org.nz.